Lieutenant Colonel Jonathan Conricus is the Israel Defense Forces international spokesperson. Hi, Lieutenant Colonel Conricus. Good to meet you and good to have you on our program. Thank you for making the time.
Thank you for having me.
I know there's been, of course, understandably, a lot of focus at the southern border, but I actually wanted to start off this evening at the northern border and ask you to clarify, because there's a lot of information out there on social media channels right now. Is there increased activity at the northern border? And if so, what is it?
Yeah, there definitely is increased activity. We have a ferocious enemy on the other side, Hezbollah, actually not another, but the Iranian proxy in the region, with 130,000 rockets, missiles, anti-tank missiles, and a lot of other types of threats against us at our doorstep. And that is why we are vigilant, and there are reports of lots of events. What I can say to kind of level the situation here is that there were recent reports just a few minutes ago of massive air raid alarms going off all over northern Israel. We have since investigated that, and it appears as of now that there was no aerial incursion into Israel, no ground incursion, and we have told our civilians that it is all clear to continue with civilian life, to stay near shelters, but that they can go out of the shelters.
Do you take some comfort in that, given the threat Hezbollah poses?
Well, it's not about comfort. I think it's more about the fact that the situation now is very tense. We are deployed in significant strength along our northern border. We have done that ever since the horrible attack on southern Israel by Hamas Saturday morning. We immediately understood that this could very likely escalate into a multi-front kind of scenario where we are attacked in the south and in the north simultaneously by two different Iranian proxy organizations, Hamas and Hezbollah. And that's why we mobilized reserves and have deployed significant military capabilities in the north in anticipation of such attacks. Yesterday, Hezbollah fired an anti-tank missile at two of our soldiers, unfortunately wounding one. We responded with artillery fire, and since then it's been a quiet but very tense calm along our northern border.
Why did the sirens go off if, in fact, there wasn't what you thought might be there? I had read a statement saying that it was a mistake of some sorts. Can you clarify on that point?
Yeah, we're still looking into that. It appears the preliminary information I have at hand as of now, and you have to be patient here because there is so much going on at every second. But the information I have is that there was indeed some flying object of something in the air. We haven't identified it yet, which caused or triggered various alarms that it wasn't supposed to have triggered. It triggered more alarms than what it was supposed to have triggered. That is currently our understanding. But the bottom line, which is the most important thing, all clear. Israelis go back out of the bomb shelters, and we continue to observe with great vigilance and what's happening across the border.
You referenced the fluidity of the situation. At the southern border, things remain incredibly fluid as well. Yesterday, I spoke to your colleague who said basically a ground mission would only take place at the instruction of the government. From where you sit, at what point would that be necessitated?
Well, you see, what the government has tasked the IDF to do a few days ago is to, in simple terms, make sure that Hamas doesn't have any military capabilities by which they can kill, terrorize, or hurt Israeli civilians. That's the overall aim of the campaign as we understand it today. And what we have been doing since is defensive efforts, plugging the fence and making sure that those many breaches that Hamas was able to create along the border are now shut and well defended. And we have been striking military targets in Gaza belonging to Hamas, and probably you'd like to talk about that as well. And what we're doing is that we have mobilized reserves. The reserves, about 300,000 of them, are currently in the south, getting ready and equipped and preparing for the missions. And perhaps indicative of what they are going to do is the fact that they are infantry, armored, artillery, combat engineers, and combat intelligence forces. So we're not talking about air or anything else. Those are the troops that we have mobilized, and they are preparing to continue our war against Hamas.
I know that Hamas uses civilians as human shields, and I know the implications of that for the civilian population of Gaza are great. And I'm wondering if, because of the potential implications for civilians there, a ground mission will be avoided if it can be.
Well, I'm sure that even at this extremely difficult hour, when we are counting our dead, 1,200 Israelis have been confirmed dead. That is an unprecedented number. Those are wartime numbers, and usually that number is of soldiers and fighting personnel. Most of those dead are civilians. And I think you can only imagine the feelings and the sentiment in Israel today, in the IDF and in the general public, about what needs to be done. Despite that fact, I can assure you that nobody in Israel wants to get out on any military adventures that are not needed and won't serve a military purpose. Having said that, I think that the situation on the ground, as we have seen it materialize with this horrible, brutal attack on Israeli society and on the communities in southern Israel, it demands an unprecedented response by us, and that is what we are preparing to do.
Is there the possibility that Israel will participate or is participating, maybe you can clarify for us, in conversations to provide a way out for civilians?
Well, that is, I've heard talks about it, and I saw Secretary Blinken speaking about it, and I've seen Israeli leaders addressing the issue. That may be happening at levels above my pay grade and above the military. What we are focusing on and what we can do in our operations is to conduct ourselves according to the law of armed conflict, to strike military targets only, and that is what we're doing, and to try to apply the least necessary force in order to achieve a military aim. And that is what we're doing in Gaza. Yes, we are striking military targets hard, and yes, there is a lot of damage, but it's important to explain, especially for the viewers who may not be all that up to speed on Gaza, that everything that looks civilian in Gaza isn't necessarily civilian. Hamas, being the cowardly terrorists that they are, they don't put signs on their buildings saying, this is the Hamas headquarters, or this is R&D, Hamas, this is where we develop rockets and missiles. Everything looks civilian. So when we look at the current outcome of Israeli strikes in Gaza, we have to remember that Hamas masquerades as civilians, hides behind civilians, and that's why a lot of the infrastructure that is being destroyed is also, it looks like civilians. So we have to bear that in mind.
You spoke about the number of troops, for example, and the type of troops that have amassed alongside that border. From a readiness perspective, Lieutenant Colonel, how soon would they be ready to go into Gaza on a ground mission? Are they ready at this moment?
A ground mission in a densely populated urban area that has been prepared years in advance by a terrorist organization with tunnel networks, IEDs, booby traps, and just a very, very dense urban environment is not something to be taken lightly by any military, and it won't be taken lightly by us. So we are preparing, studying the various venues of approach and missions and anything else that goes on with ground operations. And as soon as the Israeli government will task us to do it, whatever the government will task us to do, we will be ready to do it.
Lieutenant Colonel Conricus, I appreciate your time this evening. Thank you very much.
Thank you.